I was looking at this slide about the guys in the Olympics, the first guys to make it into in the 1908s, the black guys in the Olympics. And I was thinking, that's actually how it felt for me in my first year. I was a pioneer of sorts. Didn't win any medals for it, but it was very interesting in the sense that how it all began was my mother. The company she worked for decided that they wanted to give a bursary for me. So I was in a township school and everything was cool, we knew everybody, we spoke the same language, no drama. Then one day I got yanked out and I got brought to St. Benedict's. And I actually started, my mom was looking for a school, right? Was actually looking for St. Benedict's for some reason. And I think it was probably one of the first multiracial schools there. And she got lost, and she was about to quit. Literally, she turned on the road up there by the petrol station. She literally was turning, and then I don't know how it happened, but someone said, no, but the school is just down there. And literally, that twist of fate, I can honestly say it changed my life. And so I came to St. Benedict's, being one of the first black kids, if not the only. I was definitely the only in my class. But that was interesting, I'll tell you. You look around and it's like a single light. Much like the corporate South African. So I had my first bit of training to, man up and take it as it comes. But I had a phenomenal teacher who literally took me under her wing, and because often you would have these sporting things you have to go to, or these trips, and because I stayed in Soweto, it was too far. So Mrs. McKinnon would say, oh, you can sleep over at my house. That was the first time I saw white sheets. The best sleep ever. And, as old as I am today, I remember that as if it was yesterday. And that was the most interesting part of being a young guy in South Africa. Particularly when we had to go to the local library. I was telling Mr. McKinnon about that. But so we go to the local Bedford Library, and then they wouldn't let people of color take our books. So I was young now, and I didn't know what was happening. I just went there, and everybody was taking our books. When it came to my turn, I think Mrs. McKinnon saw what was coming, and she basically said, no, we already got your book. It's in school. That felt very special, because I didn't have to protect my book. So, St. Benedict's taught me a lot. It taught me staying power, because it was hard, I won't lie. It was very, very difficult. Imagine being thrust upon a world you didn't know how to speak the language and you're supposed to learn and participate. So it was an amazing challenge. It wasn't amazing then, it was just terrible. But it effectively made me who I am today. So, and I had two other teachers who had a major impact in my life. Mrs. Henderson. Mrs. Henderson, and this is the power of good teachers. I don't think they understand it. Mrs. Henderson saw me. I was just like any normal kid. I hated public speaking. I hated anything. And she said, come, do a speech for me. And I did a speech, and she worked with me. And she taught me how to, I suppose, overcome the fear of public speaking. And I went on to win the school's public speaking award for the 1 year, all because of one teacher. And I think Steve Jobs said it best where he says, it's important to connect the dots. You get to a certain stage in your life and you look back, and you can see all those people who had an impact in your life, and they ultimately have made you who you are and brought you where you are. So if it wasn't, for example, Mrs. Henderson, I don't think I would have ventured in so many places that I went to. So eventually I got out of school, went to university, I went to Wits, did my stint there, did the BCom degree, then went on to work for Microsoft. And that was when Microsoft was still Microsoft, it was like Apple, you pray to get in kind of thing. And it was phenomenal. It was, again, I don't think I would have ever made it into Microsoft if it wasn't my history with the school or the level of confidence that they brought into me. was an amazing journey. I spent a good 7 years there. And then a good mate of mine, colleague actually, we decided, it was a vet, he was in IT, or figure. And he said, listen man, we're doing all this hard craft, why don't we do it for ourselves? I was like, yeah, we are down in, I'm not going to finish the rest of it. And we said, okay, let's do it. And we did. And we ran our business in our boutique software business. Within our second, it was about our third year, Microsoft then came to us and approached us and said because they were a multinational, they needed to transform their business in order to continue to operate in the country. And they said to us, listen guys, we're looking for 5 great businesses and we're looking to invest 500 million into them. So, you know, this opportunity is going to come up, bid for it, and we did, we put a bid, and we won. So there we were, 30 years into our business, we have potentially 100 million rand cap business, things were good. and then what was interesting was, like anything in life, you have business partners, we had a couple of white business partners who had one piece of the technology, we had the other piece. But the point is, we had to now merge our businesses to make this thing sustainable because we had to take this business global. You know, one of the first things I learned there, and again it came from the history set Benedict taught me about having a tough guy. You very quickly realize that the things that are done out of like a grudge purchase, and a thing that is not coming from the heart, from the spirit that is intended, never work. And then we were just going against the grain of each other, and literally got to a point where my partner and I decided to walk away. And that was one of my toughest and the hardest decisions ever. I got away from 100 million in your 20s. I was like, And I don't think my wife ever forgave me for that. But it taught me about integrity and what's important for me. And that's actually what then propelled the rest of my career. It was, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it because I want to change the world. And it's because of the vision I have. And once we continue with the IT business, I saw this advert one day on TV about this guy, Vuyo, who's a big dreamer. I'm sure you've seen that Hansa advert. And there I was, and I saw this advert, and I thought, wow, that's an inspirational advert. I wonder if it's based on any true story. I wonder if the real Vuyo exists. And I did like everybody else, I Googled, there was no Vuyo, and then I quickly trademarked it, and then there was, as you can see, I became Vuyo. And I can tell you, that's an even more phenomenal journey than walking away from 100 million. Because what SAP didn't realize in selling the product, which was Hansa, is that they were creating an equally and bigger brand, in my opinion, called Vuyo's. It was one of those unintended consequences, right? So this character starts off by selling Borofos rolls on the side of the road, and he grows this thing into a multi-million rand empire, and it goes international, and he's doing amazing things. And I was like, you know, surrounded by so many negative stories in South Africa. You know, I think it's about time where we see more Vuyo's like that, you know? And having learned from my interesting BE foray, I thought to myself, this is actually what South Africa needs. Let's be, in other words, you don't need to slice up the same cake into smaller and smaller pieces, because that's all you're going to get there is grudge sale. What we need to do is create cupcakes. So get everybody, make their own little cupcakes, and then maybe one day they can grow that into their own little cake. Because the importance of that is everybody from day one knows how terrible and how it sucks to be an entrepreneur. So that when someone comes and says, hey, dude, I'd like to buy 40% of your business tomorrow, I go, yeah, there's going to be a grudge sale here, alright? But the point is, we would have learned the lessons ourselves. And that's exactly what Vuyo is about. So now that we had this great brand, what were we going to do with it? And I was still in IT, and I thought, this guy is selling food. What do I know about food, really? And that's exactly when I decided to take a jump, a leap of faith. I told my spouse, I said, listen, you see that ad about the guy who starts a business from selling Borofos roll? I'm going to be that guy. and she looked at me and said, well, if you're going to do this, you better be committed. I go, yeah, of course I'm committed. I'm always committed to everything I do. She says, no, you're going to be committed to a mental asylum. Okay, not a good start, but you know, I went and did it anyway. And we literally started with the restaurant, and what we did was we launched the restaurant and in Rampunti, because it's opposite Wits, and I saw all these students and I thought, we're going to print money. In fact, a guy who became a mentor of mine, Robbie Rosen, the founder of Landers, used to say, you know, the cash register, he calls the cash register the Jewish piano. So I was hoping that he was going to play on, but students are a tough crowd. Anyway, so we got going and the business started. But on our opening day, I needed to say hello to the world and we wanted to make, you know, the presence felt. So we hired a couple of snow machines. At this point, I'm flat broke because I put everything in kitchen equipment and everything. So it's in the middle of December, we hired snow machines and it was an amazing day and launched everything and everything went great. Next day, nobody there. Tables are empty. Oh, and then, what do you do now, right? So, I pick up the phone, I call the Sunday Times. I said, listen, would you guys be interested in hearing how we made it snow in the middle of an African summer? They go, hold on, they put me to a report, I repeated the story 3 times. And eventually they said, listen, send us a little bit of what happened and some pictures. I sent, they came back, but you could sense that this was not, you know, going anywhere fast. So I decided to write the article for them. And of course I finished it. The food was amazing. Century South African, and I went all out of town. The guy, and I put his byline and I typefaxed it properly, and he came back about half an hour later with a bit of a smile on his voice, and he said, okay, and he asked me a little bit more questions. At this point, I'm thinking, okay, maybe we've got a little bit of legs now, and we're probably making from page 40. Bearing in mind that Sunday Times in December, it's the thinnest one, right? So I'm thinking, okay, fine, great. Come Sunday, I get an SMS at 6 a.m. from Rose and said, dude, you're on the front page of the Sunday Times. And that single-handedly started another snowball of like activities that has just been phenomenal. And we've since grown the business, we've got food trucks, we've got food carts, and we partnered with SPAR, we're finding entrepreneurs now, we're training those entrepreneurs so that they make their little cookie, the cupcakes, as I've said. So they're starting off small, and as they grow, they get more carts, and then they move to food trucks and ultimately to the restaurant. And so that is the passion, because the other day I got asked, well, why do you think there's so few black retailers? And I was like, there's a little bit more capital, but actually the most important thing is the fact that it's opportunity. And it's pretty much in this way. The Greek guys, when I was here at St. Benedict's, they owned all the corner cafes. And there was my favorite one up there. We used to buy chips and all the lots of healthy stuff. Today they professionalize it and call it the fish and chips company. But anyway, I digress. So we used to buy our fish and chips there. But what the Greek guys learned was that they started with their little corner cafes. Today, all those guys who used to run those corner cafes are running all the retail malls now. They own the retail malls. And the point was that you gotta start somewhere, right? Given the opportunity. You gotta start, but you gotta graft from the grassroots, from the beginning, from the hard stuff. And then when you get to the point where you're owning a multi-million rand shopping center, the same principles apply. It's largely hard work, but the point is you gotta start somewhere and move organically. So that's what we're doing with these entrepreneurs. We're starting them with a cart and obviously injecting them ultimately into a business. And because one of the other main things that I've come to learn with the business we did in the food industry is that the franchise model was meant to enfranchise people, but it's one of those things that ironically has ended up disenfranchising people. Because a franchise costs like 5 million rand, and Nando's costs you 5 million rand, right? And then the bank only funds half of that, so that's what it's called unencumbered capital, which is about 50%. So I don't know many people, with 2.5 million rands under their mattress. If you are one of those people, we are franchising. But the point is, it leaves people give out. And what ends up happening is the rich get richer because it's the same people who then get more stores. And obviously, if I was a Yum or if I was a KFC or a Nando's, it makes sense because those guys built, as Ramon was saying, that IP stays in those people, and therefore they can multiply. But obviously, the problem is that the guys on the outside can't get in. And so, again, that's what our vision is to flip that. So, but what do? We sell South African chow. Okay? The second question I get asked, what is that? And then truthfully, after your national flag, which in our country is another cut, copy, paste job, comes your national anthem. Guess what? Cut, copy, paste job. The most important thing in any nationality is your food. Right? It defines you as a country, it's who you are. So one of the major things we're trying to achieve is to make South African food as global and as no different to Chinese, Italian, or any other genre of food. But in order to do that, number one, we've got to educate South Africans and define what our cuisine is, get the South Africans to love it, and then more importantly, start getting everybody else to love it. And that's our mission. That's why I wake up every morning and do what I do. So that is our overarching mission, and we use the years to try and achieve that. And in the parting shot, in closing, is that I learned that, because it sounds like a very esoteric top dream in Bloomberg, South African food global, yeah, right? One of the first things I learned when I arrived at Microsoft, they take you to Seattle and they put you in a big football stadium, and it's 80,000. It's almost like a cult. It's really scary. Because Steve Ballmer runs up and down, okay, he doesn't quite say that, but he says, at the time, the thing was, we'll put a desktop, or we'll put a PC on every desktop in the world. So there I was thinking, dude, do you know that 3/4 of Africa doesn't even have electricity? You're going on, and it sounded like such a stupid vision or mission. But today, there are more cell phones in Africa in fact, cell phones are number than people 3 to 1 in Africa. So, mission accomplished. So, I've learned from, and in fact, ironically, one of the ad tagline is, Vuyo is such a big dreamer. So, dreaming big is an amazing thing for setting goals, but execution, what we've discovered, is even harder and more important than just dreaming. Because if you dream, at some point you gotta wake up and live the dream. Thank you.